Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today's second MAP webinar. I am Rico de Guzman, the chair of the MAP Management Development and Human Capital Committee. We are beginning with the webinar now. Please settle down comfortably, and may we just ask everyone to pause and bow your heads for a short prayer. Dear Lord, for all who have contracted coronavirus, we pray for care and healing. For those who are particularly vulnerable, we pray for safety and protection. For all who experience fear or anxiety, we pray for peace of mind and spirit. For affected families who are facing difficult decisions between food on the table or public safety, we pray for policies that recognize their plight. For those who do not have adequate health insurance, we pray that no family will face financial burdens alone. For those who are afraid to access care due to immigration status, we pray for recognition of the God-given dignity of all. For our brothers and sisters around the world, we pray for shared solidarity. For public officials and decision makers, we pray for wisdom and guidance. Father, during this time, may your church be a sign of hope, comfort, and love to all. Grant us peace, grant us comfort, and most of all, grant us healing. Be with us, Lord. Lord, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Let us now place our right hand on our chest and join us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. Thank you. At this point, may I request the president of MAP, my senior partner and fellow EXCO member in ACRA Law, Attorney Francis Lim, to deliver his welcome remarks. Francis? Francis?
Thank you very much, Rico. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you and your families are all safe and healthy while we are on an extended lockdown. On behalf of the MAP Board of Governors, I welcome all of you to the second MAP webinar. Many thanks to the MAP Management Development and Human Capital Committee, led by Rico de Guzman, my partner, and Governor-in-Charge, JP Aveta, for putting together this webinar whose title is Managing the Workforce Today and Preparing Them for the New Normal. For the benefit of our guests and members who are participating for the first time, this webinar is the third online session that MAP has conducted in a span of 15 days. We are as busy or even more busy since the President put Luzon on a lockdown. The first webinar conducted last April 2 was on the topic responding to COVID-19 with an attendance, if I recall it correctly, of 111 participants. The second one was our very first online board meeting, which was principally devoted to discussion on what MAP has been doing and what it will do in relation to COVID-19. The third one was our first online general membership meeting of 200 participants, where we discussed the topic leading through COVID-19. That webinar featured talimos of John Clements and showcased our local CEOs in the person of Mr. Magellan Patalino representing the MSME sector, Erwin Lee of the Universal Robina Corporation representing the manufacturing sector, Art Tan of Ayala Group's Integrated Microelectronics Inc. representing the export sector, and no less than our management of the year last year, Nestor Tan of BDO Unibank representing the banking industry and financial sector. The webinar that which we are about to have, and I understand there are now 250 registrants, was prompted by questions from our membership or employer-employee relations. Questions ranged from the most basic to most forward-looking concerns like, number one, are we obligated to continue paying our employees in full even if they do not actually work at home? Number two, can we force our employees to avail of their unused vacation leaves? What if they refuse and say it is reserved for a pre-planned family vacation or wedding and honeymoon? Number three, can we force our employees to go on a shortened work week without pay? Number four, what is this CAMP program of the Department of Labor and Employment? I think the full name is COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, otherwise known as CAMP. What are the reliefs provided by it? How can our company or employees avail of them? Next question was, how do we address the employee concerns of our employees on job security? What interventions do we have to do to cushion the impact of physical and social isolation on our workforce? Another question was, should we employers ensure that each employee receives periodic outreach during the ECQ through a supervisor or body system to help them maintain their morale and mental health? How often during the week? What do we as employers do to ensure that our employees are psychologically prepared to go back to work once the lockdown is lifted? What do you see will be the new normal from an HR perspective? What's our government planning to do to help minimize the economic impact on businesses resulting from the continued payment of their employees during the lockdown or even post-lockdown? Hopefully, these and a host of other questions can be tackled in today's session. For our members and guests, by way of advance information, there will be a series of webinars for the membership on COVID-19 related topics. As a matter of fact, we will have another one in a week's time, or on April 14th, on healthcare protocols for the workforce. And we are planning another one possibly on cash flow management on a date to be announced later. For those who are not yet aware, we have created a MAP community for COVID-19 Viber group. As of this morning, we already have 535 MAP members on board. These members have shared their insights and recommendations in helping us and the country trying to address the problems caused by COVID-19. A friendly reminder though to the members of that group, please do your fact checks before sending anything. Always think before clicking. Remember that your organization map will be guided by your comments and suggestions in its interaction with the other business groups and the government on the COVID situation. Earlier, we have also created a Google Drive containing government issuances and circulars and other pertinent information on COVID-19, which MAP members can freely access anytime. Please keep yourselves updated for the sake of your businesses. In closing, thank you one and all for attending this seminar, and thank you most especially to our panelists, Usec Ana of the Department of Labor and Employment, Ricky Gutierrez of the 1771 Chateau Group of Companies of Restaurants, Nick Lim of JG Summit Holdings, and Julie Christine Mateo of SGV. Fellow members, let us all learn from their experiences and insights to help us and our businesses on how we can manage our workforce today and lead them for the new normal after this COVID pandemic. Stay safe, keep healthy, everyone, and enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Before we start the presentations and the discussion, or rather just one presentation and the discussions, I just want to emphasize the following house rules. First, please remember to mute your speakers to block off the background noise. Members of the MAP Secretariat, who are also with us in this online meeting, will do that for you in case you forget to press the mute button. Remember to turn off your camera or video for better audio quality. Given the limited time that we have, we apologize that we possibly cannot entertain direct verbal questions from the participants. Please submit your questions nonetheless through the chat button that you will see on your screen. With the assistance of our MAP Secretariat, I will read the questions on your behalf. For your information, you will only be able to see the panelists and their in the presentation, but you will not be able to view the other participants. At any point during the online meeting, in case you lose connection, please join us again by repeating what you did earlier in logging in for this webinar. I'd like to thank the panelists for accommodating us for this webinar, which is of interest to many, as many, in fact, have registered today. As earlier noted, we have with us Usec Ana DIONE, the Usec in charge, I understand, for regional operations of the Department of Labor and Employment. Thank you, Usec. We have also Ricky Gutierrez, the Chief Executive Officer of the 1771 Group of Restaurants. Thank you, Ricky. We have, of course, our friend from the JG Summit Group of Companies, Nick Lim, the Senior Vice President for Corporate Services. Thank you, Nick. And no less than the partner in charge for talent and people of esteemed SGV Ernst & Young audit firm. Okay. Now, I'd like to note that this webinar actually was born out of the questions, as properly Francis has noted. Many, not just MAP members, but many in the business community were asking what will we do and what would be the status now of our employees. And so I was asked to kick off, to make a presentation on the legal aspect and the law and the basis for possible measures with respect to handling the compensation of employees during this critical time of the lockdown and the pandemic. Okay, the whole basis of compensation in the Philippines is based on the fact that you render work, you get correspondingly compensated for such work. And out of such basis, the Supreme Court in various cases upheld not just the concept of fair day's work for fair day's pay, no, but laid the basis and framework for the no work, no pay rule. Okay. Now, next slide. Next, the fair day's wage for a fair day's labor principle assumes that you render work which need not be productive at the workplace. At the workplace or at a prescribed workplace which need not be in the office. Okay, next slide. That work need not be productive in the sense that you are producing, let's say in the production floor, a particular product. It is enough for you to be paid if you are suffered or permitted to work. And in one case, that case of SSS versus SSS Supervisors Union, the Supreme Court said that if there is no work performed by the employee, there can be no wage or compensation due the employee, because where the failure was by reason of something that was not attributable to the fault of either the employer or the employee, then each party bears his own loss, no? And in that case involved a union of supervisors wanting to go to work in the midst of a strike declared by the rank and file. When they could not go to work because of that picket staged by the rank and file, they charged SSS and wanted to be paid for the days lost when they could not return to work. And in this decision penned by no less than the esteemed Justice Amorfina Melencio Herrera, she stated the age-old rule governing the relation between labor and capital. And as we mentioned, a fair day's wage for a fair day's labor. And she said, if there is no work performed by the employee, there can be no wage or pay. Unless, of course, the laborer was able, willing, and ready to work, but was illegally locked out, dismissed, or suspended. It is hardly fair and just for an employee or laborer to fight or litigate against his employer on the employer's time. In this case, where the supervisors were unable to report for work at the SSS, the failure to work on the part of the members of that union was due to circumstances not attributable to themselves, no? But neither should the burden of the economic loss suffered by them be shifted to their employer, in this case, the SSS, which was equally faultless, considering that the situation was not a direct consequence of the employer's lockout or unfair labor practice. Under the circumstances, therefore, Justice Herrera said, it is but fair that each party must bear his own loss. Okay. In another case, that of the Visayas Community Medical Center, there were again also union members wanting to be paid, but could not be paid because of a host of circumstances, and eventually they were dismissed. Theorizing illegal dismissal, they wanted to be paid their wages for lost compensation. No? So again, the Supreme Court said that since they were not illegally prevented from working, there could be no basis for payment of the claimed compensation. No? Now, the whole thing here is that if you do not render work unless there is a clear mandate in some law or the labor code, then you cannot have any basis or right to claim any payment for compensation. Now, in the many queries that have come my way during this lockdown from both local and foreign clients, there was a discussion on what are the other options available. And I discussed with them this particular provision under Article 301 of our labor code. And it says, if there is a suspension of operation of the business or undertaking, the employment relationship is not thereby terminated, but it is merely suspended. Okay? But that should not last for no more than 6 months. Now, in a case that was decided, that case of Irvin versus rather Lopez versus Irvin Construction, and in the subsequent Cebuguero case, the Supreme Court admitted that there is no next slides, no, that there is no particular provision in the labor code on temporary layoff. Okay, and the Supreme Court said that we can, however, invoke by analogy Article 301, used to be 286 of the labor code, which says that we can suspend the relationship because of business exigencies, loss of orders, lack of business, depression, industrial depression, recession, no? Until management is able to make a decision whether or not to recall these people or to really terminate them, no? And so in that case of Irvin Construction, where a laborer was laid off temporarily, supposedly, but was not eventually recalled, the employee was eventually deemed to have been constructively dismissed after the lapse of the 6-month period. No? In the subsequent case of Cebuguero, the Supreme Court said that the same requirements for the permanent separation under the authorized cause provisions of our labor code would apply in case of temporary layoff. No? And so therefore, when you temporarily lay off or put somebody on floating status, you will have to also give him the 30-day notice required for authorized cause separations under used to be Article 283 of the Labor Code. No? So when employers ask us today, can we, because we're not certain what might happen, whether or not we can lay off temporarily our people, we invoke these decisions of our Supreme Court, and by analogy, Article 301 of the Labor Code. No? Now, I'd like to say here that in line with the no work, no pay rule, the DOLE, in fact, the office of our panelist, Usec DIONE, issued Labor Advisory number 9. No? And this Labor Advisory recognizes certain flexible work arrangements, such as the reduction of work hours or work days, the rotation of workers, let's say every other day or every week, no? And there's a third option there on forced leave. Now, the question was asked as to whether or not we may ask employees to go on forced leave. This particular advisory says that the requirements merely are consultation and a filing of a notice to the Department of Labor of the adoption of, if it be forced leave, that forced leave, or a work rotation, or a shortened work week. No? Now, but note that this resort to these measures under that advisory should merely be temporary. As to how long that temporary duration is, then that might be arguable for now, because in fact, we don't know up to when the lockdown continues. We only know, however, that Proclamation number 929 of the President declared a state of public health calamity for a period of 6 months, although we might be informed later that it could possibly be extended. No, so 6 months from March 16, that leads us to September as the at least initial duration of the public health calamity. Now, the requirements for the adoption of any of these working arrangements, as I've said, are consultation, posting of a copy of the advisory, and notice to the DOLE. Now, we've mentioned the temporary layoff that is akin to the temporary closure mentioned in Department Order number 9, and the requirement there is 30 days prior notice. And we've just highlighted also here the applicability of the rulings in Cebuguero and Irvin Construction. Now, when clients ask me as to what might be relevant for purposes of determining compensation during this period of the lockdown and the pandemic, there is also a pertinent rule on non-diminution of benefits. Every employer probably knows this already, but I just would like to state that Article 100 of the Labor Code notes that when an employer will have unconditionally and through the years given a particular benefit, and it has consistently implemented the grant of that benefit, then Article 100 and jurisprudence thereunder require that that be maintained unless there is a corresponding substitution of that benefit, or there is consent on the part of the employees for it to be removed or substituted. Now, employers also during this lockdown have asked me, many companies in the States, in other Western countries have imposed on their employees the matter of reducing pay. Can we, because of this pandemic and the recession that will necessarily come out of this pandemic, impose on our employees the reduction in their monthly salaries, in their monthly salary rates? Unfortunately, Articles 113 and 117 of our labor code prohibit deducting from the wages of employees any amount without their consent, and prohibit the withholding of any amount from the salaries of these employees without their consent. So if the question is if an employer, whether or not an employer may unilaterally reduce pay, I'm afraid it may not, because otherwise these prohibitions being clear mandates under the labor code and our penal provisions, any violation of these rules may result later in criminal prosecution that may end up in both a fine and or imprisonment of no less than 3 years for the employers concerned. The way to go, therefore, is to manage the operations in such a way that you revise and redesign them by reducing the work hours and redesigning the production flow probably by a shortened work week, a work rotation, so that you manage the hours. And while you might thereby reduce the take-home pay of the employees, you are not necessarily reducing the monthly rate. Now, I'll end there. And should there be any further questions, we shall be willing to answer the same later. Okay. At this point, can I ask the good Usec? Usec, we've heard our president ask what has the Department of Labor instituted by way of probably monitoring the labor situation in the country and or assisting employees and or employers alike in addressing the many problems arising out of this pandemic. Usec? Usec? Anna?
Good afternoon. Do you hear me now? Good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, we can hear.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Attorney Rico, for the presentation. I hope that everybody is cleared on that. What have you been doing with regards to Labor Advisory number 9? We have been receiving reports of companies that have adopted flexible work arrangements and temporary closures, affecting 1.6 actually, going to 1.7 workers. And we have this program, of course. We put up this program called CAMP, the adjustment measure. And we have assisted, we targeted 321,000 workers with the budget that we were able to realign from our own budget, the 2020 DOLE approved budget of 1.6 billion for the formal sector and about 1 billion for the informal sector. But unfortunately, we closed the camp as of April 15 because there is a new program set up by the Department of Finance, quite similar, but there are some differences. The small business wage subsidy, in effect, trying to help small and medium businesses so that after the after the ECQ, small businesses will be able to continue operation. Ito naman pong camp, while the ECQ is enforced, then we help some workers with a one-time financial assistance of 5,000 pesos. So practically, that's what I've been doing. We were also able to assist about 166,000 informal sector for the financial assistance also, referring to the informal sector. there are about 10,000 or 11,000 establishments that have applied or reported adopting the flexible work arrangements.
Thank you, Usec, for that. I'd like now to go to our panelists from the private sector. You know, I was at a webinar and heard this McKinsey presentation about this COVID-19. And McKinsey says that there are actually 5 horizons facing businesses and employers. And McKinsey calls them the 5 R's: resolve, resilience, return, reimagination, and reform. No, so resolve by addressing challenges representing or impacting suddenly the workforce, customers, and partners. Address near-term resilience issues, so cash flow, cash management, and other resiliency matters. Concern with returning to normal or new normal business and back planning to scale that up. Reimagining the next normal and what a discontinuous shift looks like and implications for how the institution should reinvent itself. No? And reforming the business environment and being aware and monitoring what government and other stakeholders in the business environment have done to reform, to adapt to the new normal. No? So I'd like to ask our panelists from the private sector, Ricky, Nick, and then Julie, what is now your most pressing concern now that we have been surprised by this enhanced community quarantine, this lockdown that has in fact been extended? Ricky first. Ricky?
Well, the main concern is the safety of our employees. Because with the coronavirus, the transmission is unpredictable. It can happen anytime. So it can happen. There can be transmission on their way to work. There can be transmission in the workplace. So the safety and the well-being of our people is more important for me personally. That's why even before the lockdown was declared, I locked down ahead of everybody because that was my main concern. I wanted my customers and my employees to be safe. Because everything was uncertain. So even up to today, I have not reopened, but we're looking at reopening by the end of the month. Actually, we were thinking of reopening by the 16th, but there was an extension of the lockdown. And I decided that we will, regardless of what happens, we will create the necessary protocols to try to open by the 30th. So we're putting in place hygiene and safety protocols. We're looking at changing the business model altogether. And rather than have dine-in, we're looking at delivery and takeout, which a lot of restaurants have actually done. But I didn't go with the wagon. I didn't ride on the wagon when I saw a lot of restaurants jumping on that opportunity, because my main concern was the safety of my employees.
I see. It's good to note that, Ricky. No, now, but while you're there, can I ask? Because everybody seems to agree that the industry most impacted by this particular pandemic that is called the virus COVID-19 is the travel and tourism and the hospitality industry. Right. While food is one of the essential industries, you know, it is not necessarily, I suppose, meaning restaurants. No. So yeah. How does your industry, the restaurant industry, view itself? How are you impacted, and how do you plan to cope up? Because I noticed that you are in fact already planning to get back, no?
Right.
I see this positive attitude in you. And do you see yourself being able to really get back despite the challenges at social distancing?
Not
Ricky?
we won't generate the same volumes that we would generate in a fully operational restaurant, which is dine-in. That's where you make the money, the turnovers, things like that. So we're still piloting. We don't really know. I've been talking to a few restaurateurs, and they said that it's not that consistent in terms of delivery and orders. A lot of the households, because the offices are closed, and basically you're depending now on households who want food delivered to their homes, who are on lockdown, and they want to have. They're probably tired of their food, but at the same time, they're also looking for recipes. I have friends who've been asking me for recipes, and I've been giving them my recipes, so that they would know how to make, let's say, for example, my most popular dish, the corned beef sinigang. So we posted the recipe of the corned beef sinigang and taught them how to make it in their homes, no? But we can't expect the same volume in terms of being able to profitably operate, especially if our location's in a mall where we have to pay expensive rent.
I see.
So we have to
Okay.
make adjustments. Like we have to go to the mall operators and ask them for an adjustment in the rent. Meaning, rather than pay the fixed rent plus the variable, probably they can just charge us the variable. Because
I see.
whether once we start that kitchen running, you're paying for an overhead which you would incur whether there's an order or not. Like the gas is gonna run, you have to maintain a certain temperature, your ingredients are there, your people are there, your utilities running. So right now, all you want to do is just operate, and then it's like an engine that you have to keep it idling. When you do run, you can run at full speed.
I see. Thank you, Ricky. Nick, how do you see yourself, proceeding to a new normal, Nick? And what keeps you most occupied? What's your pressing concern nowadays, Nick?
Tank, petrochemicals, digital. So in other words, if you look at the group, the concern really is looking at not just the safety of our employees, but at the same time looking at how business can continue, where consumers would depend upon our different products and services, while making sure that in the process we are able to help the government address this very unprecedented the crisis. No, so it's really balancing between concern for our employees, concern for our consumers, the public in general, and at the same time concern for supporting the government in addressing this crisis. So in some sense, if you look at our businesses, we are affected in different forms. No, if you look at the airline business, Cebu Pacific, the flights that we do are just Mercy flights, helping deliver products to where they're most needed. But in that sense, there practically is no operation, as differentiated from our food business. We need to continue to produce food for our people, for our consuming public, and the retail, where we need to open our drugstores and supermarkets, ensure that our Filipino countrymen are able to buy food to sustain their lives. No? So in that sense, we need to juggle between keeping the morale of our employees up, insofar as those businesses that are affected are concerned, and at the same time making sure that the morale of our employees who are expected to operate on site continues to happen, because we need them to operate our factories and do an agile way of working from home which should enable our employees to be able to, even if they don't work on site, are able to still get themselves productive and contribute to the whole ecosystem of the group. No? So in that sense, if you look at the group with a value coming from our founder, Mr. John, and which Lance now, our boss, is also advocating for, we're a very filial, familial group. We put paramount our concern for our people, because as we say, you address your people, our employees, then they'll help address our business. So it is the symbiosis between the two. So in that sense, we are now currently preparing for the post ECQ re-entry strategy in terms of looking at how we can reformulate the new norm, working environment, where we will need to consider that the health of our people has to be assured, and therefore we need to maintain all of those social distancing, making available transport for our people, ensuring that they're healthy. So we're in that process of addressing all of those variables.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Julie, what keeps you as the SGV partner in charge of talent and people occupied today, and what is your most pressing concern, Julie?
Yeah. So for good afternoon for SGV. We're a professional service firm. No, the good thing is that we were able to shift to a work from home working arrangement immediately during the ECQ, given that we've invested highly on digital transformation over the past years. And this is a good thing for us as we balance now, similar to Nick, balancing the needs of our people and the well-being of our people, and at the same time being able to help our clients, for the services that we do. Some of our people, some challenges maybe, some of our people were able to adjust very quickly to the new way of working, meaning we picked them up, we placed them at home, and then they started working with no concerns. But of course, there are some who face challenges or struggles. These are various things. Can be isolation, physical isolation, the challenge of being able to manage their time, being able to be productive while at home, those with personal concerns. We have people who are taking care of elderly parents or the sick, so they have personal struggles as well. So these are the things that we're doing on the HR front, on workforce management. What keeps us busy right now is we have to continue to engage our people on a virtual setup, which is, of course, different than a face-to-face setup, right? But I think what worked well for us is because how SGV is structured. We are structured in a cluster manner, small groups that comprises the big group, that will comprise the big group. And we call that cluster, or what we call counseling families. So each person belongs to a cluster or a counseling family. And this structure allows for us to be able to connect to our people very easily. So the partner in charge of the cluster is able to have regular meetups, have regular communication, and we are able to identify at that level who are the persons at risk or those with struggles. And that's where we also come in, is HR, to help manage well-being. Very paramount to us is to ensure that our people are safe and are well. And when we say well-being, that's all facets. So personal, physical well-being, mental well-being, emotional stability, even spiritual. We have done series of communications with our teams, with our people, and I guess in a way that helps us keep them engaged. And the communications ranged from fun activities like we have trivias and quizzes on a weekly basis, or tonight we have a music jam that's going to be live on a closed SGV Facebook page.
Oh, that's nice.
To the serious stuff, tips on them on how to separate work from home, like how do you walk away from your laptop when you're at home, you turn around, you see a laptop, it's still there. So tips on those, as well as physical well-being. So I guess that those are things that we are looking at right now as we continue to service our clients from home.
Oh, that's good to hear, Julia. You have a clustering family. You have music jams. You regularly shout out tips on work from home. I suppose we can ask you to speak to our people in our firm later
Sure.
when you go back to work. But in any case, I suppose this is this the way that you plan to address employee concerns about job security, physical and social isolation, and probably even mental health concerns. But are there any particular modes of addressing this that you've seen that worked with either your firm or with client companies?
I guess if we look at a framework on how we deal with this, no, it's very important that you mentioned the McKinsey report earlier.
Yes.
It's very important to identify what are to understand the impact first. How did this pandemic actually impact the different processes as well as the different business units. So because for us, it might be simpler given that we are just a professional services firm, like one main line of service. But for example, for the likes of NIC, wherein you have different, you are at different stages of the servicing your consumers and your clients in different processes, then it's very important to identify what's the impact. And that impact will now probably result to workforce impact as well. For example, if you are in a business that is considered essential, it does not necessarily also mean that you will not have any workforce concerns there, because the workforce concerns can be different. Like it can be overworked. These are the individuals that are highly likely to be more exposed to the environment. You now talk about how do you sustain the business. And then if you're on the other extreme that you are closed, no, or you are at pause at the moment, then the impact to your workforce is again different, because you now talk about job security, you now talk about liquidity, cash liquidity, what are the manpower costs, etc. So in our case, we have identified that the work from home actually works for us on a general scale. And the plans that we are looking for in terms of the return to work or the return to the office is that we are seeing actually that we can continue to work from home, and there will probably be a slow return to the office in a physical scale. And then later on see what this new normal is going to bring us as we service our clients.
Okay, thank you, Julie. No, well, at this point, I'd like to take a look at some of the questions that have been submitted. No, one, I see a question from former UP President Fred Pascual. Thank you, Fred, for attending this webinar. And he asked, do the provisions of the Labor Code apply equally to both managerial and non-managerial employees? What is the differentiation between the two types? Well, yes, Fred. No. The provisions that I've mentioned apply with equal rigor to both managerial and non-managerial employees. Managerial employees are those employees who can formulate, decide on, and implement managerial decisions like hiring, firing, redesigning the work, etc. No? The non-managerial, of course, are the lower ones, including the rank and file and the supervisors. The supervisors are those who effectively recommend the taking of the managerial prerogatives. No? Now, there is this other question from Delia Ridoloso. No? And probably the good Usec can answer this. As for Labor Advisory number 9, how do we submit a flexible work arrangement notice to DOLE 7 days prior to implementation when we did not know that the ECQ would happen? Since we are not working at the office, how do we do this? Would posting it on the electronic bulletin board, I mean the advisory, posting advisory in the employee electronic bulletin board be considered as compliant? Usec?
the 7 days period, we have already relaxed that one. I think we have issued another advisory. I think it's advisory number 12, relaxing that provision or that requirement, the period. Posting it digital, I think at the moment during the ECQ period, we have to accept that.
Okay, okay. From Roda Lugay for Julie, no? Julie, have you required some of your people to go on forced leave? And follow up, since you are digitally equipped to do work from home, will this be a new business model for you post ECQ? Julie?
Okay. We did not put anyone on forced leave as of this moment. So all of our employees are working from home and are receiving their compensation and benefits. And then on the next question, yes, this business model is something that we are looking at, since we have seen during this ECQ that there are really tasks that we can do from home, and this is something that we are reviewing for our new normal.
Thank you, Julie. We have a question from Elmer Francisco Sarmiento, no, to the panelists. No? We are unsure when the situation will end. Can we reduce working days, hence no work, no pay indefinitely? Ma'am Usec, what do you think?
I think your presentation was able to answer that. There's no indefinite. There's a 6-month period provided for in the labor code. I think that still stands. We have not suspended any provision of the labor code.
Okay, okay. Now there is there were questions earlier sent us, but one of those was having seen the pronouncement of our president last night. I gather that many watched it. The question was, would that be, in your opinion, really leading towards martial law-like lockdown over COVID-19 quarantine violators? How might this impact business activity? Would any one of the panelists care to answer that?
I think, if I may, this is Nick. I think
Yes.
the challenge among us now is to be compliant to what the government wants us to do, and that's maintaining social distancing, staying at home, because that's gonna manage the curve of the virus going down. No, but in our case, it's the reverse. It still continues to increase. No, so the challenge really is how do we keep our citizens at work, or rather at home. No, so in our case, as we prepare for the re-entry, it's inevitable for us not to address our new ways of working. No, in terms of looking at rationalizing our workforce, in terms of rotating how they come in to work on site, and at the same time maintaining a number of employees who will be working at home or from home. And therefore, we need to enable them to do the virtual way of working. So in that sense, we need to really have the government address this spread of the virus by way of enforcing what are expected of everyone. No? And that's maintaining social distancing, just keeping ourselves healthy and safe. No?
Okay, thank you, Nick. I have another question here from an anonymous attendee, and the question goes: the CAMP program is open to any employee affected by the quarantine, regardless of size of the employer. The DOF program is just for small business. With the CAMP program closed, what is the relief available to employees of non-small, I suppose the bigger ones, who are also on a no work, no pay status? Usec, probably, baka tanong sa'yo yun, Usec.
listening to the launching of the DOF program kagabi, large businesses are still covered by the DOF, the DOF program, except that I think they are second in priority, but they are still covered.
Well, okay. Thank you, ma'am, for clarifying that. Now, there is this question addressed to me with respect to reduction of wages. And the query goes, if we can do a redundancy program, why can't we do and ask our employees to reduce their pay? No? Instead of redundating them due to business losses, ask them to reduce their salaries. Now, the basis would be there would be worse consequences, no? And I think it's a matter of convincing the employees, no? Because if they are able to realize that there are other alternatives open to the employer, instead of forcing the employer to probably lay you off temporarily for a period of at most 6 months, or even go to the more extreme measures of laying you off permanently through any of the authorized causes, such as installation of labor-saving devices, redundancy, retrenchment, or cessation of operations, either for the complete establishment or a portion thereof, then you might eventually be able, the employer might eventually be able to secure the consent of the employee. We're not saying that the reduction in pay is absolutely prohibited. It's prohibited if there is no consent on the part of the employee. And so therefore, the employer is not prevented from convincing the employee to agree instead of worse consequences. Okay. There is this other question that says, assuming there are jobs which can be totally or partially identified to be done at home because of this ECQ experience, will it be legal to reduce salaries as they save on transport, lunch, and other costs? The new normal will be social distancing in the workplace. So this is also saving on space costs. In the business, on the business side, how do we monitor their productivity? Now, I'll address the legal side. The legal side is whether or not we can reduce their salaries. Again, the same answer. We can try convincing and discussing and letting the employees appreciate that probably reducing pay, even albeit temporarily, will be one measure that employers may look at. And if instead of constraining employers to look at worse consequences, employees might want to consider. No? Now, on the productivity part, can I ask Julie? Julie, how there's this challenge of monitoring productivity of employees coming back to work in the new normal amid social distancing? How do you address that, Julie?
So for us in SGV, we're basically output based, no, in the way we do our services, no. So we have tasks assigned to our staff and employees. So I guess number one is we establish a protocol with them, no, in terms of working from home, which means they have to be online, they have to be reachable, they have to be able to respond to us in terms of queries as well as to the clients. And then the way we manage how productive they are is in terms of the output that they churn out as we service our clients. So that's how we look at productivity while working from home.
Okay. I might as well tell you, if I'm not mistaken, that question came from your friendly competitor, your friend Robert Manabat. No? Okay.
Hi, RGM. Hi, RGM.
Sending in that query, Robert. Okay. There is this question from Delisa Ridoloso. As for Labor Advisory number 9, I think this has been answered. Now, there is an anonymous attendee who is of the view that not all types of work can really be done at home. Are most companies applying the forced VL arrangement for them? Can that be applied for a selected group of employees only? Usec, may I throw this question at you? How is this forced leave arrangement accepted? Has it been adopted by many, and can it apply only to a select group of employees?
Actually, that is stated in Labor Advisory number 1, and per our record, there are companies that have indicated that they adopted the mode of forced leave. Ever since we receive a lot of questions about these leave credits. Okay, if you're on forced leave, it's either you use your leave credits or you don't have any leave credits and you will be on a no work, no pay scheme. There's also some employees asking that what if they will not use their leave credits, and of course we bluntly say that that's your choice, but you will not be paid. What we are trying to say is that if you use your leave credits, then at least during the period, you'll still have some amount so that you will be afloat during the period.
Okay, thank you, Usec, for clarifying that. I completely agree with you on that. Thank you. There is this query that comes from Roland Ruiz, and it asks, are you expecting a consolidation in the industries strongly impacted by this crisis? What will these industries now look like? Can I throw this question to first Nick, and then probably second to Ricky? Okay, Nick?
Okay, yeah. If you look at the situation today, I think it's proven one thing to us, in our group. And that is, some of our companies are working from home, have been working from home as part of our regular setup in the office. URC is working from home once a week. Some of our functional groups, likewise. Our digital group is also working from home. So in that sense, digitalization really is inevitably one of the new ways of working. It has electronically connected the world small. So therefore, that's one of the new ways of working. So at the same time, as you do the work from home, where you go digital and you get to be agile, I think there's a lot of opportunities to integrate some of the work. In JG Summit, as for example, we have a shared service that looks after the common services. Instead of having each of the businesses do their own servicing, we have a central group that looks after payroll, timekeeping, procurement, treasury and controllership. So there's a lot of opportunities for integration. On data and analytics, we also have a Data Analytics Ventures Inc. group that looks after mining our data and integrating our e-commerce, helping the various businesses leverage our own ecosystem. We have also our Digital Transformation Office that precisely accelerates the need for us to really go digital, defining our new ways of working, where more and more open office space is encouraged. There's more collaboration, interaction. And at the plant operating level, looking at integrating some of the processes that would achieve maximum benefit and productivity. So these are inevitably what we're looking at. And in fact, they're currently in some areas within the business, they're already happening. So this pandemic crisis, if at all, benefit that I think it has given to us, if you look at it on a positive note, it has, I think, accelerated our conclusion that we need to really do digital ways of working. We realize that there's a lot of opportunities to increase our productivity, to do mergers and integration on the ways of how we do our systems and processes.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Ricky?
Well,
Ricky?
it's a really challenging question on our part.
Yeah. Consolidation of food, the food business, probably restaurants. Are you in soon probably looking at also delivery services? You know,
Yes,
consolidating those. Or yeah, go ahead.
on delivery. So now we're looking at our delivery system and we're putting together a dispatching system. So it's taking orders in the delivery of those orders now. So it's putting that whole thing which we've never done before into place, which is hopefully by the end of the month. But there are two teams that are working. Now, one is a team that's working from home, which is what Nick has actually was talking about, the digital side of it, which is our marketing, our accounting, our HR, and then there's the physical side of the job, which is basically the cooking. Well, the waiters they will start doing the delivery. So we're getting waiters that have motorcycles, and we're fitting them in so that they can fit up. We're fitting in the motorcycles so that they can deliver. But the cooking is very hard because people have to interact while they're cooking because there are different methods of cooking which have to be coordinated. No? Like for example, when you're doing corned beef sinigang, for example, one is actually brining and boiling it, and the other one is actually preparing the vegetables that go into it. You know, it's an interaction of a lot of things. No? So it's hard to do social distancing. So it's basically the control there is the attire, the face shields, the masks, the gloves, the washing of the hands, and making sure that they're really fit to work before they come into the kitchen.
I see. Okay, Ricky, thank you. There is this other question from an anonymous attendee which asks, is there anyone, probably from DOLE Usec, looking into businesses, companies that have so far closed their businesses? And how many employees have so far been laid off? Do you have some figures, Usec?
Well, I have as I was saying a while ago, our report only says about 1.6 workers are affected, but we do not have I don't have the disaggregated data of the termination. We have it in another file.
I see. So just to clarify that, you're saying, ma'am, that there are about 1.6 million workers, formal workers, that is, who have been reportedly affected by this pandemic, but that does not mean that every one of those 1.6 million have been permanently laid off, no?
Yes.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Usec. Now, there is this question from Ed Pangan about the critical factors for a productive work from home arrangement. What are these critical factors? Julie, can you probably take that up? What are the critical factors for a productive work from home arrangement?
Yeah, I think number one is really technology, the connectivity to be able to do the work that we do at home. No, so that's one area of challenge also even for us, because as our people go to their homes in the provinces, there are instances wherein the connectivity in terms of infrastructure is not as good, no, as in NCR.
Yes.
So that's number one, technology. I guess the other things would be having a mindset of working at home is very critical, because it's going to be very difficult. It is very difficult for us to separate the work from the home, no, at this point. So the mindset and the practices or behavior of working at a set timetable, with a good work environment, knowing what you are excuse me, knowing what you are expected to, or what you expect yourself to complete for a certain day is also very critical, so as not to overtax yourself, or place undue pressure on you also in terms of being productive, no, being continuously productive, but identifying what are the tasks that you need to complete, and having a good work environment, and then making sure that you're able to manage your time properly.
Okay, thank you, Julie. There is this other question from our attendee Roland Ruiz asking probably any of the panelists about the possibility of planning for a second wave of after the ECQ ends end of this month, no? How are those plans any different from what you are doing now? Is there anyone wanting to answer that?
Yeah, may I? Yeah.
Okay, Nick?
I don't think it will ever be the same again before compared to before the ECQ was declared. Obviously, in the absence of the vaccine that will immunize us from the virus, social and physical distancing inevitably will have to continue to happen. So we're currently rationalizing even our how we rotate our people coming to work and those working from home, how we get them in the office, where we maintain a certain distance, one office apart from each other. Even the way we conduct meetings, we're looking at doing it digital. We will be discouraging group meetings. If at all, it just would be an inevitable meeting that has to be conducted in groups. Otherwise, we would consider virtual meetings. We use Teams for meetings, even delivery of items. No, will have to be picked up at the lobby. So all of those protocols, will definitely change the way we will conduct our work. We will with the e-signature, likewise, we don't have to physically sign on documents. So electronic signature is now also being addressed, going paperless. So all of those virtual ways of working, we have to address. And at the same time, keeping cognizant and conscious of the importance of providing tele consultation, making sure that at any one point in time, employees coming to work are free of virus, or if there are any instances where symptoms are seen, that we have a medical service that can immediately be provided to our employees needing medical attention. So it's definitely going to be the new way of work, how work is going to be done. More agile, more virtual, and less number of people coming to work, including even the way we accommodate people in elevators. That also is being considered.
Good to note those new protocols that going about work, Nick. And this one is also for you. It's, while you're there, I might as well ask this question from JJ Moreno. He asks, since you have businesses in different industries, do you have a uniform set of COVID-related HR policies? Is your approach one of consistency across the group, or do you recognize the peculiarities of each business unit?
Of course, we do both. Where we can harmonize and standardize, we do so. But when we also have consider the peculiarities of the businesses where we're in, so we also maintain that fair balance between the two. So, but in terms of showing concern for our people, we are consistent, and our approach is standardized across the whole group. For example, we heeded to the call of the government to help alleviate at all the impact of the crisis, the pandemic, to our employees. So we've made a decision to really assume the attendance of everyone, regardless of whether or not they work. So in the case of those who work, we incentivize them. We gave them some form of allowances to make sure that they continue to come to work. We have provided shuttle services, at the same time maintaining, again, social distancing. So if the shuttle service then would have a capacity of 50 people, we made sure that we only accommodate 25 of our employees. So that now multiplied by twice as much the number of shuttle buses that we have. So in a sense, so as we move on, some of our businesses that don't have any operation at all, we have even resorted to some of our executives volunteering reduction of their basic salaries, no? If only to ensure that we continue to provide employment for employees. The idea really is making every employee feel the concern of the group, and it happens at the leadership level, no? Between the immediate superior and the employee himself. No? Another example is, you know, when we talk of relationship, no, we have a unionized group. For example, in Cebu Pacific, our cabin crew is unionized, and they were at the height of the CBA negotiation. And because of the relationship that has been established, which is very cordial, the union, in fact, has agreed and volunteered to defer the CBA negotiation until after the things have normalized. No? So again, we bank on the relationship, and this is where the leadership of every manager is put to test. No? I think nothing beats communication, making every employee feel that they're cared for, that they are recognized, and that they're valued. No? Because at the end of the day, you know, if they see that the sincerity of management and concern, you don't have to exact from them whether they should go on leave or whether you should file a forced leave, because it is them themselves who would say, if only to protect our business, then we are even willing to go, so long as when things normalize, we will be the first to be given the priority back to employment. So again, it goes back to leadership, the importance. And if it starts at the top, it starts from no less than our CEO, Mr. Lance, has released around 5 letters to the employees, no, from the start of the crisis all the way, almost every week, making, you know, every employee feel that no less than the top leader cares and values them. We do our regular pulse check about how our employees are feeling, just to find out what their concerns are, at least for us to know what the gaps are that we need to address on top of what we have already extended to them. No? So it's really keeping our hearts and nose and everything close to our employees, no? Making them feel that there's genuine concern. No? Every opportunity to make them feel, then we do it. Even if they work on site, we see to it that we visit them and make them, you know, feel that there's leadership that's available on site.
Okay. Yeah, Nick, you mentioned earlier about shuttle services, no? There is this query about what scheme can get employee commuters to the workplace while observing social distancing. I mean, especially if you have shuttle services. And how would you then ensure that transport operators can operate viably in light of social distancing concerns?
You know, some of our companies have shuttle services. No? So we have already established partnership with the shuttle service, you know, operators, and you know, the protocol has been made very clear. And what we do is, for every trip, there is what we call an employee coordinator that takes care of ensuring that you know, the orderliness and, you know, the distancing is safeguarded and protected and complied with in the bus. No? And then they have their duties and responsibilities laid out very clear to them. So that's one of the things that we do. And in areas where it makes it very difficult for us to get the shuttle to be made available, when we make use of some vans, no, that can transport, pick up our employees at certain pickup points and then bring them back to certain well, points where they alight from the service. So things like those.
I see. Okay. Anyway, that query came from, by the way, Ed Pangan. Huh? Now, there is this query from Michael Sherwin Makatangay, no? And he asks, how can an employer meet his responsibilities, especially on providing health benefits concerning an employee's health and safety, if these employees are working from home? Any thoughts in that regard?
Yeah.
Julie?
Yeah.
Or Nick, okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think that we're, you know, some HMOs or some medical service providers provide tele-medical consultation, no? Where they have a 24/7 facility that would, is manned by a doctor or a nurse or someone that can that's available for consultation. So that's one of the services that are made available also. And at the same time, any symptoms, you can do consultation, and it's the doctor that would assess whether you need to be already you need to contact the OH for further checks, or you just stay home and they prescribe things that you need to do to address your whatever you're feeling. So things like those. And we do check every day number of our employees who may be exposed or who may be suspects or probable of contracting viruses. So the virus, no. So we track them, and it's really, again, it goes back to showing our concern to our employees, because you have to take note that how employers, how leaders treat their people today will greatly influence the decision of employees after this pandemic. For when opportunities are made available between staying in the current employer or moving to the next employer, I think to a great extent, employees will remember how their employers have treated them today.
Thank you, Nick. There is this observation from Adam Ang of Business World that many employees in industries providing essential services have such as food, retail, manufacturing, hope for their own and their families' medical needs and insurances are properly covered, given the huge risk they face at work amid the public health crisis. No, Ricky, can you probably at least comment on this? I mean, essentially comparing and really the risk attendant to people in the food and retail industry.
Well, you have to really be very careful about that. Like as of now, what we did was because Medical City has this teleconsultation with the clinics, so we made that available to all our employees, so that if they do feel something, they can call up the Medical City teleconsultation, find out, address their concerns. Now, on the workplace, what we intend to do is we have a doctor that is in place who will check them before and give them a fit to work order before they actually are able to go into the site. And then when they get to the restaurant, we have a safety officer that makes sure that they fulfill all the protocols, such as wearing the gloves, the mask, washing their hands all the time. Even with regards to the food preparation, they follow all the protocols with regards to the food preparation. So those are the things that we're putting together. But with regards to making sure that they're okay, my main concern was that they wouldn't go hungry. So what we have done is we were giving, though there's right now all the restaurants are closed. So what we're doing is we're paying our employees half the wage that they normally get, just so that they have something to get by until we're able to put them back to work. So we have not cashed in their VLs or their 13-month pay, but we're just giving them financial assistance.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. There's this question from Richmond Lee that asks, what would be the legal document that we need to have our employees sign as proof for DOLE that adjustments were implemented, such as using leaves and salary adjustments were conveyed properly and approved by the employees, aside from the fact that notice is given to DOLE. Now, with respect to the adoption of a forced leave, as earlier stated by the Usec, there is really no need for that consent, although there is employers are enjoined to consult and or inform the employees prior to adopting the forced leave and or in charging the leaves to their leave credits. Admittedly, there is no need per that DOLE advisory that there is no need for prior consent. Okay, what the notice to the DOLE says and contains is which particular working arrangement is adopted for the establishment. No, now there is this next query on from Miguel Garcia, and he asks, just to clarify, to have a temporary suspension of work of the company must submit to the DOLE 7 days or 30 days ahead of time. And is DOLE open now so we can submit the notice immediately? Well, as I've said, the Department Order 9 mentions a notice for the appropriate corresponding work arrangement, which is a shortened work week, the work rotation or the forced leave 7 days before adoption. And for the temporary closure, temporary layoff for no more than 6 months, it's 30 days prior. No, but as the good Usec has stated, I understand Usec, no, you've relaxed this notice periods. Is that correct, Usec? Usec Yone? Ana?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there is no prior period required for as long as the notice is filed?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Now, the next query is with respect to non-diminution of benefits. Can an employer modify the nature from transportation allowance to internet allowance, or is the employer required to continue giving the transport and give a new benefit? As I've said, if there is a substitute benefit that can reasonably be deemed as of equivalent value as the one that is sought to be substituted, then that can arguably at least be deemed as compliance with the non-diminution rule. In other words, you can substitute it if it is of equivalent value. No. If we adopt a work rotation to lessen the number of people in the office per day, can we pay them only for the days that they are in the office? Yes, there is this anonymous, anonymously sent in question if you can pay them only for the number of days they are in the office. Of course, that's the whole reason for why we have adopted, and our jurisprudence has adopted the no work, no pay rule. Now, there is this query, Usec, what happens to companies who have submitted applications for camp and have not been approved as of April 15? You have the answer?
Ganito, as of now, our regional offices are processing about 85,000 workers yet, but we advise them that those that will not be accommodated will already be advised so that they can apply with the DOF program.
I see, I see. Now, Usec, also while you're there, there is this question from an anonymous attendee. May we know the status of the 5K financial assistance? In other words, has it really been stopped already? Because companies have filed and there have been follow-ups, and I suppose there have been no responses. Usec.
What would I say? As I was saying, our offices, our regional offices are currently processing about 85,000 workers, because we received the funds yesterday and we gave them already. So I think they're busy processing payments. In the event that the companies who have filed will not be accommodated, then we told our regional officers to advise them to already apply with the DOF program.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. While you're there, assume yourself to be a legislator, ma'am. Usec, there is this query from Pons Cruz. What amendments, if any, would you want introduced in the labor code to attend to this new normal?
Wow.
Usec.
A while ago, maybe I will jump into the discussion of the future. What are we going to do? I'd like to share with you that us also in the department is busy, virtual meetings, discussing about what do we do next. Maybe I'll share with you the gist. Number one, of course, we're joining NEDA here. We are thinking, we're just thinking you can you can give your inputs. We are thinking that should the lockdown period really ends on April 30, of course, all of you will be invited for the May 1 activity, which is practically a mass or a Thanksgiving mass. And then we are thinking that it should not be an abrupt report to work for all the workers. We're thinking of maybe a gradual, about 30%, and then after 1 month, another 50%, and then 75%. Reason being that I think the companies will really have to adjust also, taking into consideration the occupational safety and health of workers and also social distancing. We were discussing like coffee shops, wala na yung kumpul-kumpulan, I think even in restaurants. So we're into that mode already. Also, we're thinking of, I think we recognize that there would be a lot of workers that will be having problems, and so how do we deal with them? How would the digital world come in? And so we are also putting up some programs again for those that will be laid off or for those that will be unemployed. We're seeing that there will be a spike in unemployment rate. So we want to be in the localities, in the barangay level for that side. But for the industries, I'm glad to hear your concern about health of your workers, because that's number one on the list also in the discussion of the Department of Labor, like health surveillance. How would you go about workers coming into work? Who should shoulder the testing and all? Well, we're thinking about cost, but we do prioritize OSH compliance, and we are totally discussing this with the Department of Health. So, well, that's the gist of what we're discussing in the department about what we call an employment recovery plan. I see. So we should expect substantial amendments in the Occupational Health and Safety Code, ma'am? Or proposed amendments? I think so. Not really major amendments, but how are you going to implement it? I think the core message is already there. But how do you do it? I think it's in the implementation that we will have some adjustments.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, I might as well take these two questions together. There's this question from ANC, from Maricel Limhoco, asking the businesses whether they expect the lockdown to push through at the end of April, although the Secretary Usec said that DOLE is planning for it happening indeed, ending on April 30. No, but are the businesses planning likewise? Or are they planning for a later end to the ECQ? In other words, another extension. And in that regard, there is this related query from anonymous attendee. How do you now take care of your suppliers? And how do you treat your employees in light of the ECQ? Can I ask the three from private private sector panelists to address this?
Yeah.
Can I ask Julie to answer first,
yeah,
then Ricky
yeah.
and Nick? Yeah.
Yeah, so for our suppliers, we continue to take care of them as well. So we're processing payments as much as we can, given the limitations. But we want to ensure that similarly to how we take care of our employees, we know that our suppliers are also likewise challenged. So we try as much as possible to process the payments for them. So that's number one. The other thing is on collection from customers. We work very closely with our clients as well as the financial institutions we work with, in terms of how are we able to manage our own, of course, cash liquidity, how we'll be able to collect on a timely basis and be able to deposit on a timely basis. So we work closely with our financial institutions. So we have arrangements on fund transfer, bank fund transfers, how we will collect. We've also worked with physical collections, using various channels, picking them up from our clients if these are manual checks, and then bringing them to the banks to ensure that we continue to manage our liquidity.
Okay, Ricky?
We intend to face our opening, but whether the lockdown is going to continue or not on the 30th, we plan to start opening on the 30th, but with very strict protocols with regards to our people, so that we make sure that there's no transmission and that the food doesn't get spoiled. So it's really a gradual phasing of opening the restaurants, and that choice locations. We're not gonna, depending on which malls are going to work with us, we would work with the malls that are more friendly, with regards to the rent.
I see. How about your suppliers and contractors, Ricky? Do you continue to pay them? What do you do? Are you negotiating with them, etc.?
We're negotiating terms right now with them because there's no revenue coming in, so they understand that there's no revenue coming in. But we're working on a cash on delivery arrangement for now.
I see. Now, Nick, in the case of the JG Summit Group, what are you doing?
The group is preparing for the lifting, if at all it will be happening by first week of May. But whichever way the government is gonna take its decision, we will support it. What is important is that the transmission is going to be addressed or mitigated in the absence of the vaccine. So on the suppliers, we continue to pay them. We have a group that on a shared services that handles payments of what we owe our suppliers. In fact, in the case of our Robinson's land group, we even have waived the rentals of tenants who are unable to operate until such time that they are allowed to operate. So that's a kind of assistance that we have extended to our business partners. So in that sense, we continue to iterate, we continue to improve on how best we can address health of our employees, being able to also provide for making sure that we're able to pay our suppliers, and at the same time our tenants are also supported. If at all, if they cannot really operate, then we have waived the rentals.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. There is this query. I'll address it to Usec, DIONE, and there is an effort on most, according to Mr. Sebastian Quiñones, and they are in fact investing on work from home arrangements, no? And he says they are trying to improve their tools and improve on connectivity, and now searching for various methods for the soft side. One limitation, though, he observed, is government requiring signed papers or physical presence, no? Can government also make preparations to reduce physical presence, do you think, Usec?
You know, I'd like to agree with somebody said, with this COVID, the positive thing that it brought to us is government now is recognizing e-signature, virtual meetings, they're doing it now. So I'd like to believe that it will continue, and government's transactions will have a drastic change with respect to face-to-face transactions. Coming as we are thinking of how do we do submissions of documents, we're in that process already. So I'd like to believe that government, the entire government, will do so.
Aye, thank you. Thank you. Well said, ma'am. Well said. Now, the next query is apparently calls for an opinion or a comment. It comes from JJ Moreno, and it asks, for any or all of the panelists, do you see the situation now as a choice between people or profit? Meaning, if you take care of your people, your profits, at least in 2020, will in a way be sacrificed. What, in your view, should weigh in heavier? The organization's financial capabilities or its values system? Ricky, Nick, and Julie, in that order, can you give a comment or two?
Well, for our situation, we've written off 2020. So what we're looking at is how do we survive right now and till the end of 2020. So that's basically the challenge, no? But in terms of the people, we have decided that it's so hard to train cooks and waiters, no? And if given the type of service that we have, so our position is that we're going to try to keep all of them as much as possible, but just go on rotation, and those who are not working will just cushion their needs, no? Meaning, if we can't pay them the full wage, you probably pay them 50% of the wage while they're not in operation, while they're not at work. But that's the situation. No, we don't see any improvement till the end of until a vaccine is found. Given the type of industry that we're in, I mean, it's a people industry. You know, people go to your restaurant, they expect to be served, they expect to be delivered the dining experience, but that can't be done. So the most you can do is ramp up on your delivery and your takeout. So everything's got to be digital. Payment has got to be done digitally. Your backroom has to be calibrated with your operation. So that's basically where we are right now.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. Nick?
Well, if you look at it, you cannot choose between one and the other. It's symbiotic. Business need people, and people need the business. So in other words, to the extent that for as long as the business can take on the hit, we will continue to take care of our people, provide jobs, and as they are able to contribute, we will continue to also, the business. To the extent that we can even we can continue to operate, we will operate. But at certain point in time, when conditions really get to be worse and it makes it impossible for business to continue, then we will cross the bridge when we get there. But we are not yet thinking of closing if any of our businesses. So that's why measures are being undertaken in the form of many forms. By way of reduction of compensation of certain groups of employees at the top level, to rotating attendance of people working from home and working on site. And we're for as long as we can provide jobs, we will. But if in the process some work cannot be done, then we can even resort to even advancing to the extent possible. If our new employees don't have yet leave credits, then we advance leave credits, or we would even advance certain part of what he would be earning in the future. So in other words, it's both. No, you cannot say we cannot say we have primary concern for the business, because the business without people cannot run. Just as people without business, neither can we also provide the livelihood for our employees.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Well said. Now, Julie.
Yeah, similarly, I believe that it works hand in hand, no? So people and the strength of the business should be together. It cannot be one over the other. Especially in our industry, the professional services firm, wherein really people is the strength of our organization, no? In our industry. I think what is important is that we do realize that maybe it's probably in the short term, this 2020, as Ricky said, if you write off 2020, if you look at 2020 and say there might be short-term losses in terms of the business organization, but whatever actions we do take now is going to bring in value as we move forward, and it's going to strengthen the business organization moving forward. I think what's important also is that we go back to the values of the organization, the purpose, the why we are doing the things that we do today, and the decisions and the actions that we'll do, it will just flow. If it's a balance between nurturing our people and still taking care of our clients and our business, then that's how it's going to move forward.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Well said. Now, there is this query on non-diminution. It says, if we only pay for days people or employees work, won't that be in violation of the non-diminution principle? I'd say no, because the no work, no pay rule is entirely different from the non-diminution rule. No, for paying for only for actual services and hours rendered, that is in compliance with the no work, no pay rule. The non-diminution rule simply says that for benefits that have been consistently given through the years, this may not be diminished except with the consent. No, now, but altogether, the non-diminution rule is not inconsistent with and should be construed in relation, let's say, to the various rules in the labor code that allow temporary layoff. During the period of temporary layoff, since there are no services rendered, then it could be that there are also no benefits to be paid, no? Because the non-diminution of benefits rule contemplates a situation that services continue to be rendered, no? Now, okay, there is this also observation from Roland Ruiz about physical e-signatures being still required by notary publics. Is there a move to allow e-signatures for these contracts and be considered legal? Now, in fact, e-signatures may be authenticated as the signatures of the parties to a contract under the E-Commerce Act. No, but whether or not the notary public concerned in a particular document would be willing to adopt the provisions and comply with the requirements of the E-Commerce Act might be on a case-to-case basis and may vary from notary to notary. No, now, okay, there is this question from Maricel Limhoco, reposting one from Ariel Ong. No, for the DOLE Usec, if we terminate our probationary employees today due to demand destruction, can we hire them again as probationary employees starting from the beginning when the business recovers? Or will this be considered as continuity of the first probationary period? Ma'am?
Baka mas ikaw ang sasagot niyan. I think yes.
Okay.
I think yes, because
ikaw muna.
Yes. Yung probationary period, ang sinasabi niya dyan is that demand destruction. And so therefore, there's a reason for ending the probationary period. If you intend to hire him again after the period, another different kind of work, because we like to believe that businesses will now have to change their modalities and methods, then by all means, you can hire him again on a probation.
Yes. Tama. Now, while you're there, ma'am, there's this query from Manny Alcantara, and he says, DOLE in Region 1 prioritized payment to the bigger companies compared now to the smaller companies. Was there a guideline on how the process applications for the 5,000 assistants were to be handled?
In Region 1, I think if I remember, the figures are quite low. The applicants are low, so maybe those that applied are the bigger companies, and so therefore they're given the opportunity to be processed. It all depends on the number of applications that a region receives.
I see, I see. Okay, now for the panelists, the private sector panelists, there is this query from an anonymous attendee. Have any of your companies recommended forced leaves?
Can I answer that?
Yes, Nick.
We don't force our people to go on leave. So you have to differentiate between asking people to be on leave and not having work to be done. So if your planes, our planes can fly, our pilots cannot fly. That you can fly the planes and the cabin crew, right? So therefore, they're on ground unless there's work for them to be done. Then there's no work for them to be done. So beyond the some assumed attendance, if they wish to be paid, then they have to file for their leaves. So it's not really forcing them to be on leave, no? Because forcing them to be on leave, if they don't want to be paid for not having work, it's I think a prerogative or a privilege of an employee. But if they want to be paid, then they have to file for their leaves, and management will have to accomplish approve it. Now, if the question is, what if the employee doesn't have work and doesn't have any leave credits anymore? So one of the measures that we have done was we advanced the 2021 leaves so that they get paid. So that's the kind of approach that we do.
Okay, good. Anyone from either si Julie or Ricky wanting to comment on that?
No forced leave on our part as well. So we continue to work from home. Yeah.
Yes, we noted that. Thank you, Julie. Ricky, on your part, do you have forced leaves?
We want to go on leave. What we have decided was to cushion our people through the crisis.
Okay, good to know that.
Rather than force them to do anything, just making sure that they're okay.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. Ma'am Usec, again, there is this query from an anonymous attendee asking, what is this DOF program about? How is it called? Are there same mechanics as those for camp?
It is called Small Business Wage Subsidy. It has similarity with camp, but the method of application is different. You have to go to BIR, after which, if you get confirmation, you go to the website of SSS. But it's an upgrade. I may say it's an upgrade of camp, because camp is one-time financial assistance in the amount of 5,000. But for the small business wage subsidy, it is a maximum of 8,000 for 2 months. So it's an upgrade of camp.
Okay, thank you, Usec. Now there is this question, I suppose this is the last open question, about resignation. He says, it comes from an anonymous attendee and asking, if an employee files his resignation on April 16, still under lockdown, when does the 30-day prior notice period begin and end if the company is on temporary work stoppage due to COVID-19? Is May 16 a valid day of last day of said employee? Unless the good Usec countermands me, I would say yes, because the 30-day prior notice period for resignations is not affected by the declaration of the lockdown.
Yes.
Okay, I think it's 2:30, and it's more or less. I suppose there are no longer any other open questions on my list. Unless Francis or Arnold have anything to say, do you? Francis?
Attorney Francis can do the closing.
Okay, I can do it, Rico.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Rico, for moderating this session and for asking the panelists, which included you, of course, answering the many questions that were put forward by our members. I think the level of interest is very high. I think Arnold has just informed me that at some point there were 234 participants in this session. It's the highest ever attendance in our webinars. Thank you, Usec, Anna. Julie, thank you. Nick, of course, thank you. My cousin. And Ricky, thank you very much, Ricky, for participating. Now, there are some takeaways that I would like to highlight. I think it was pointed out that until the vaccine is discovered, and according to experts, it will take at least 18 months and even beyond that, 2 years. The way of our doing work in the workplace will really drastically change. Of course, social distancing will be there. Even the way people, our employees, will go to work will have to be reshaped. It's good that we have companies like JG Summit, the JG Summit Group, that has a shuttle system. They can afford it. But we in MAP are also cognizant that not all our members can afford a shuttle system. And that's why you may want to know that quite recently, the board approved a proposal by our Committee on Traffic, Infrastructure, and Transport of a modified transport plan that will be submitted to the IITF. Bearing in mind that social distancing, hygiene, and so on and so forth will have to observe when our workforce will go back to work, hopefully after the April 30 extended ECQ. Okay, and that's also the reason why our next webinar will be on health protocols for the workforce. Thanks again to JP, Governor JP, for putting this together and for volunteering to spearhead again this webinar on health protocols for the workforce. It's so important in our view because if our workforce will be allowed to work, we don't know who among them will be the carrier of that of the COVID, and therefore there should be protocols put in place not only at the barangay and the LGU basis, but also on the companies. For example, I think what is envisioned is only those employees who can withstand after some tests will be allowed to work and to remain at work. But there still remains the issue because, for example, an IGF positive employee, which means that he has the capacity to withstand the COVID virus, can still be the carrier even if he's IGF positive. So that's a challenge for our employers and for the employees as well. On the electronic notarization, as our moderator Rico said, electronic signature is already legal. In fact, way back in 2000 under the Electronic Commerce Act. However, the Supreme Court is yet to approve rules on electronic notarization that we submitted for approval. And in fact, I was quite recently, I was coordinating with the Supreme Court if it's possible for the electronic notarization rules to be approved, because that will help in a very big way in our social distancing requirement. You don't have to go to a notary public, and the notary public doesn't have to go to you, just to notarize a document, which in many cases is required by our existing legal framework. Now, there's some light at the end of the tunnel for our businesses. As you may have read, a stimulus package is being planned. In fact, there's already a draft bill by Congresswoman Stella Kimbo, and another bill expected to be filed by Joey Salceda. I'm in touch with them. Even I'm also in touch with the committee chair, Sharon Garin of the Economic Affairs Committee, which will be in charge there. And based on the bill, draft bill that was submitted by Congressman Stella, I think it's a 370 billion stimulus package. And 110 billion of that, of the 370 billion, will be intended to give some relief to businesses whose operations were disrupted by COVID, but continue to pay their employees. So I think there's some relief that the employers who continue to pay their employees can look forward to. There's also another 50 billion, especially earmarked. At least this is just a proposal for MSMEs, because I think the studies have shown, and I think this is common sense, that the most hardly hit part of our business system are the MSMEs, and that's the reason why 50 billion of that 370 million relief package or stimulus package is specially intended for MSMEs. No? And of course, there's an amount for the most affected industry, like the tourism industry. I think there's some amount there. Now, I'd like to note that in the 110 billion pesos for businesses whose operations were disrupted and which continue to pay the payroll, the provision that I've read so far does not distinguish whether you're an MSME, a big business, or a medium business. So, because there is this misconception that is will be limited to MSMEs. No, I think there's a separate package, as I said, for MSMEs. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I understand, based on my interaction with the chair of the Economic Affairs Committee, that the draft bills will be consolidated before hearings will be conducted by the Economic Affairs Committee. And from there, they would like the stimulus package to be put in place as soon as possible, as they did with the Bayanihan Act. So thank you very much to our members. Thank you especially to our panelists, Rico, JP, for having a very, very successful, well-attended webinar. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Keep safe.
Thank you.
Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.